Hello and welcome to our webinar on designing a human-centered HMI in the automotive industry. My name is Fabio Sandrin from WeConnect Global Leaders GmbH, and I am happy to welcome all participants and our speakers today, Sylvian Castet, Global Head of Design and Experience, and Derek Vita, User Experience and Human Factors Research. Sylvain has over 15 years of experience in a wide array of design industries, both in B2B and B2C environments. He has been leading strategic visual brand building and product development on a global scale, as well as working on user experience, industrial design, infotainment, branding, marketing, and product design. Derek provides clients worldwide with consumer-focused insights on every detail of car and mobility-related experience. For over a decade, he has led international user-centered research and provided actionable design guidance for companies and government agencies in the automotive and wireless spaces. Before we begin, please know that all of us will be muted during the session and only Derek and Sylvain will have access to speak and present. The overall discussion is expected to last for about 40 minutes, and then we will open the floor for questions. Of course, if you have some questions, please do not hesitate to use the question tab on the right side panel on your screen and type them in. I will take note and I will include your question in the Q&A right after. If you have any difficulty during the webinar, kindly make a note in the chat tab on the right side screen panel. We will instantly get in touch with you to help solve your issue. So that was all from my side for now, and I'm happy to hand over to Derek.
Thanks, Fabio, and hello, everybody. I'm Derek Vita. I'm Senior Analyst with Strategy Analytics. For those of you who are not familiar, we're a global independent research and consulting firm. We operate in a number of verticals, including smart home, wireless devices, service providers, and of course, in automotive. I specifically sit in the user experience practice. So I focus specifically not just on user experience, but on automotive and mobility user experience. And that's something I've been doing both product side and consulting side for going on 15 years now. What we do on my team is provide independent viewpoints for a variety of stakeholders with respect to the end user perspective. And we do that in a number of different ways via surveys worldwide, focus groups, in-depth interviews, and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do today is provide sort of a 10,000 foot level view of what is happening in the car, what is it that consumers want to do in the car, and how are they currently accomplishing what they want to do in the car. So this is a question that we get quite often from a variety of stakeholders in design and product planning, is this piece of what tasks, features, and functions do people want to have on hand in the car at all times? And more importantly, what is that going to look like at the next model turn in 5 to 7 years in automotive? And I always respond the same way. Right now, again, if we're looking at a 10,000 foot level, people want to get from A to B safely and securely, and they like to know where they're going. And they also want to be entertained maybe a little bit along the way and have some form of communication with the outside world. In 5 to 7 years, that's largely not going to change. People are still going to want to move from A to B safely and securely, be entertained in some way along the way, and maybe have some form of communication available to them. The only thing that will change in that 5 to 7 years is the sources and methods that drivers and passengers use in the car. So what I'm going to do is provide a few pieces of research that we've collected at Strategy Analytics that sort of helps provide that baseline in terms of what consumers want to do in the car. Let's use entertainment as an example. This is something that we track year over year going out the past decade or so. The infotainment sources that people most likely use in the car on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. As an example, I've thrown up trend here from 2012 to 2018. And this is daily and weekly usage of AM/FM radio and a variety of other infotainment sources. And you can see the trend here from 2012 to 2018, how it's sort of narrowed. Previously, it was sort of radio and everything else in the car. Now, largely, infotainment designers have a really tough task ahead of themselves where they basically need to have all of those sources available relatively quickly within the same layer. AM/FM radio is still number one, but as you can see, and the CD player obviously falling out of favor, but streaming radio, portable music player, apps, even HD radio are rising in importance as well in terms of what people want to use in the car. These trends vary slightly. This is just US. These trends vary slightly for Europe and China, but largely the trend is, at a high level, it's the same. Consumers want to have, quote, everything at once available to them at all times. Now, you'll notice, though, that even though those trends are tightening, radio is still number one. So why is that? This is a question that we've taken to consumers directly. For example, with an effort we conducted earlier this year in the UK and the US, where we asked the millennial demographic specifically, why do you listen to radio in the car, especially for certain things like the morning commute? There's a couple of reasons for that, and they tend to fall into one of two buckets, either convenience or utility. It's either a convenient or a utilitarian thing to listen to in the car. In terms of convenience, there's no need to carry a separate cord into the car to listen to a streaming radio service, for example. You don't need to actively choose which song to listen to or which playlist to find, which album to find, things like that. You don't need to worry about whether the commute will be long enough to hear all of the content, things like that. From a utilitarian perspective, all the information that they need is there in one place. They just turn it on and it's there. It provides a passive way to catch up on news and current affairs. They have sort of this semblance of productivity. They get some insight in terms of what's trending so that they know what people are talking about when they get to the office. So as with the previous slide I mentioned, you notice streaming radio becoming more important, apps becoming more important, but radio is still by and large most important in the car for those reasons here. We can just turn it on and it's there. So entertainment, again, is just one example, but there's a number of other things that people want to do in the car, whether it's sat nav communication, things like that. And what enables all those things is connectivity. So that's something that we have brought to consumers as well in terms of the top 30 use cases that people want to use connectivity for in the car. And they all tend to break out into one of these three categories, sort of a red light, yellow light, green light scenario. Best for cars, almost always things that are directly travel related, things like predictive traffic and alternative routes, finding local traffic conditions, finding out what your weather is like on the way, parking availability becoming increasingly important, and of course, streaming customized internet radio. There's a bunch of use cases that are sort of model and segment dependent, things like gas prices en route, a little bit more important for an earlier tech adopting segment. Paying for tolls and parking from the car is something that's becoming increasingly important. Streaming video becoming surprisingly important for specific segments, for example, battery-powered electric vehicle owners sitting at charging stops, wanting something to entertain themselves using the integrated screens. There's also a variety of use cases that we see enabled by certain automakers and suppliers that are just not ready for the car yet. Things like browsing restaurant menus, for example, local movie theaters and show times, social media readouts. Those are the things that are sort of nice to have, but don't necessarily grok for a large percentage of the consumer base in the car. But as I mentioned, there's a whole bunch of use cases where you need that connectivity in the car. It sort of enables those functions, and that's why we see an increasing importance placed by consumers on the availability of that connectivity pipe in the car, especially when it comes to the purchase time. As we see in this trend from 2014 to 2019, this curve is increasingly moving to the right. It's becoming increasingly important to consumers' purchase decisions for the car. Now, I need to speak very briefly about the effects of the pandemic in terms of what it is that people want to do in the car. There have been a few things that we have been tracking. This is data from Waze. We look at vehicle miles traveled, and what we see is that people are still spending time in their car, but they're spending time in the car for different purposes. So you'll see the commutes have recovered, but not quite to the level in the US where they were in April. But long trips have greatly taken the place of things like planes and trains for those summer vacations. So you see this big spike in terms of using the car for a long trip. So this has a number of ripple effects, this difference in whether people are using their car for a commute or for a vacation. One thing is that terrestrial radio ratings have been way down, especially for providers like NPR. People are not rejoining programs like Morning Edition at home. It's just not happening. We have new difficulties for things like predictive traffic alerts as traffic patterns and timings change. There's also some new opportunities. So as there's a heightened interest in no contact or low contact payment, you see these new opportunities for in-car payment for things like parking or tolls or petrol, things like that. So it'll be important to keep an eye on these trends and determine which of these will continue post-pandemic as these shorter and more routine car journeys return, and which of these, such as increased interest in streaming radio and podcasts, really take off even further in the car. So that's something we'll be keeping track of. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a baseline in terms of what it is that people are doing in the car, at least from a very rapid fire point of view. Now what I'd like to do is give you an idea in terms of the tools that people are using in the car to accomplish those tasks. So what does that look like? This is something that we've been tracking throughout our series of benchmarks. So we will conduct every year about 5 or 10 different infotainment benchmarks, either with 12 first-time users or via an expert evaluation. So we've seen a lot of this new technology as it hits the market, and we're able to leverage that to provide that end user perspective for our clients. Now, automakers and suppliers have a couple of different strategies here in terms of the tools that they provide to car owners and leasers to listen to radio, use sat nav, use communication devices, things like that. One is novel HMI, so you'll see things like separate dedicated touchscreens for HVAC and then sat nav radio. You'll see things like novel jog dials, you'll see gesture controls, you'll see laptop touchpads, you'll see steering wheel based touchpads. Those are all, they feel nice in the showroom, and some consumers really take to them. Not necessarily as useful for certain connected use cases where you need that one-to-one interaction modality. And so that's why you see, especially in high volume, makes an increasing shift to this touchscreen and voice-based experience. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, again, you have this consumer expectation that they're going to have access to all these connected services, and this is the best way to provide that experience. The other, of course, is a cost-based consideration for automakers. It's easier to slap a touchscreen in there and call it a day for whatever it is they want to do. So for the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to focus on this high volume experience, which is shifting more to this touchscreen and voice-based experience. Because this is something that we've been tracking year over year in our survey research going back to at least 2014. We look at usage of voice controls in the car, satisfaction with voice controls in the car, and satisfaction with 10 different aspects of the touchscreen, including fingerprint smudging, screen quality, so on and so forth. And we're seeing some interesting trends here. As voice usage expands outside the car, in mobile devices, in home devices, you're seeing that expectation sort of start to filter into the car, where voice controls have been around for many, many years, and you're seeing this gulf of expectation differences here. So you're seeing usage go up, which is great. Daily usage of in-car voice, especially for things like phone calls, has increased. The problem, as we see here, this is satisfaction, is that voice satisfaction has started to tail off in the car. Because again, you're seeing this expectation that consumers are carrying from outside the car for what that proper voice experience should be like, and they're becoming more disappointed with what they're getting in the car. Same thing with touchscreens, except the tail off has happened a little bit earlier. Again, automakers are in a tough spot here with the longer development cycles. It's a little bit harder to get an improved touchscreen into the car in a way that consumers might be used to, with, for example, a mobile device or a home-based device, things like that. So you're seeing a bit more of a tail off in terms of touchscreen satisfaction, especially for things like fingerprint smudging. So now that most consumers have been exposed to these immersive touch and voice-based experiences outside the car, the in-car experience is seen as inferior, unfortunately. So there's a number of ways to address that, and none of them are particularly easy or palatable. But the bottom line here is until an intelligent voice assistant starts to spread into the car, you're still going to see these issues, things that we see all the time in our benchmarks, things like speaking before the beep, natural grammar, quote unquote, that's not really natural, still forces the user into this sort of unnatural way of speaking. And with touchscreens, it's going to be a while until we see some sort of improvement there. Again, it's one of those things where supply cycles need to catch up in a way that they have not. I want to focus on voice assistants specifically because this is a perfect example of where we're seeing expectations outside the car start to affect the in-car experience. We've been asking Amazon device owners, for example, how interested they would be in having Alexa in the car. Same thing with Google device owners and how interested they would be in having a Google Assistant in the car. So this particular line of research started back in 2018. You're seeing this data here from us. And not just the familiarity, but the usefulness of those voice assistants outside the car are really starting to drive consumer sentiment for these intelligent voice assistants, such that it's becoming detrimental almost to an automaker. They're sort of seeing this difference in experience they're getting on the mobile device, on a home-based voice-enabled device, and comparing that to the automaker experience, which has been very command and control, unnatural, going back for a decade, and has not really improved in the manner that another voice control outside the car has. And so you're seeing this gulf of interest starting to develop. So how do consumers get around this? This is where you're seeing the real rise in projection and smartphone mirroring systems. So CarPlay, Android Auto, Baidu Car Life, even aftermarket devices, things like Echo Auto, where consumers can bring in a voice and touch-based experience and/or a touch-based experience that is superior to what they've been used to in the car and provides everything that they need in sort of a just good enough experience for themselves in the car. So CarPlay is not perfect, Android Auto is not perfect, but it provides, especially for the connected sat-nav and connected media experiences, a function feature that works just well enough for most consumers. And so that's why you're really seeing these start to take off. That's not to say that embedded systems don't have a future, they do. As I mentioned, we've been conducting these consumer-focused benchmarks and expert evaluations for going on 10 years now. And of the 50 systems that we've looked at over the years, the highest scoring one that we have tested continues to be the Tesla Model S. And the reason for that is because of the 10 or 12 core tasks that we asked our 12 first-time users to go through. All of our users were able to complete all of the tasks that we threw at them with the Tesla Model S, even Bluetooth pairing, which is remarkable. It's not necessarily something that people are going to be able to complete, especially if they're a non-early adopter or an older segment, things like that. That's not to say that each task flow is error-free, but at least they were able to complete it, which again is remarkable. So there is definitely a future for embedded systems. Again, you need to start with how you're targeting your system and making sure that the segment you're targeting it towards has everything that they need or want in the car. So for things like getting me from A to B and entertaining me along the way, using the sources that I want, things like that. Yet to be determined for some of these more advanced systems, especially Android powered systems where you have, for example, the experience here on the right, we're up to 24 different icons floating. Yet to be determined whether that accomplishes the same level of experience we're seeing in some of these other embedded systems like Tesla, like MBUX, even with mirroring systems. But again, my punchline here is that embedded systems are not necessarily inferior to projection systems. They can deliver the exact same level of experience. You just need to start from the user and work outward. So hopefully that sums up from an end user perspective what tasks are important in the car, how they're doing it, and current frustrations. This baseline gives design and product planning teams the tools that they need to provide an experience that is everything that it needs to be in the car. And what it needs to be is safe and secure. It needs to be easy to use, and it needs to be delightful, because if we're not delivering that sort of experience where it's safe, easy, and delightful, they're going to find it elsewhere. So now that we have that baseline established, I'll turn it over to Sylvain, who will tell us how his design teams sort of craft that experience. So Sylvain, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Derek. I think you need to share the module with me. bloqué ensemble. Okay. Great, thanks, Derek. Hi, everyone. So clearly we see from Derek's presentation that even as automakers are adding a lot more technology to in-vehicle infotainment system, the UX obviously hasn't kept up. Consumers expect the same level of ease of use and delight with the IVI system as they experience with other personal devices in their lives. There is definitely a need to rethink how in-vehicle digital experiences are designed. So now let me walk you through how we think about and address this topic. Today, I'm going to touch upon our infotainment system design, and I will walk you through our design principle, and will introduce you to our next generation system while addressing the needs and challenges in the current industry. First, I would like to start with a quick introduction about Telena for those who haven't heard from us yet. We started in 1999. We were the first company to bring GPS navigation to mobile phone. Now we have almost 20 million vehicles equipped with our navigation system on the road, 10 million of which are connected cars. We are about to launch our first vivid infotainment solution, and then today, during this presentation, I will give you a preview of it. Now, what you see on the screen is what we definitely stand for. Always start with the user, as we do not simply design features, but we also solve problems. I usually like to start every presentation with an introduction of our design crew. So here are a few of them. Our belief, it's the strength of the team is each individual member, the strength of each member is the team. We have about 40 designers at Telena, divided between 4 design studios located in Santa Clara, Shanghai, Xi'an, and Cluj. Our pool of skill set goes from interaction to visual designers, including researchers and technical writers. Obviously, there is nothing we could achieve without that level of talent and individual commitment, so I wanted to spend a minute to introduce them. Now, jumping to the core of today's topic and what we see as one of the biggest challenge, the majority of drivers integrate their life into the car like this, which is not safe and not delightful. So it ultimately raises a few questions. What should a user expect from a safe and intuitive infotainment solution a couple of years from now? How do we design and create a fluid and seamless in-car experience with a proactive system that anticipates your needs? And most importantly, how do we create experiences tailor-fit for multi-sensorial interaction model? It means like leveraging voice and gesture in addition to touch. Our perspective on this, personal automobile needs to provide more personal value to the customer. There are really 2 fundamental things that we must have. Number 1, it must be safe to do in the car or made safe to do in the car. For example, we all understand that texting on your phone while driving is very unsafe, but if people are doing it anyway, can we make this user behavior safe through intelligent application, design, and technology? And then secondly, what we build needs to delight users. So what do I mean by this? Ultimately, a delightful experience is one that makes you feel happy. Of course, a feature or interaction must fundamentally satisfy the user needs and wants, but in this day and age, to be a completed experience, it also must be beautiful and novel. So I mentioned I will walk you through Vivid today. Now, what is Vivid? Vivid is a personalized cloud-first infotainment solution that seamlessly integrates in internet-based entertainment and communication services with native vehicle function, and then this into a delightful, safe user experience. Vivid makes it easy to use your car every day. It makes your journey safe and productive while being trustworthy. And most importantly, you start to rely on it. And you start to rely on it because it makes your life easier. Vivid also aims to bring the best of connected infotainment together, including navigation, entertainment, productivity, communication. Our philosophy is to create an easy-to-use, experience-forward infotainment system that provides the key feature that people love about their phone and the third-party services they access through it in a fully integrated, uniformly branded driver-safe package. So before showing you the latest version of Vivid, I would like to walk you through our core design principles. These principles are the guiding sentences that helps our team to reach the purpose of our product while helping them to make meaningful design decisions. It falls down within 4 categories that we believe cover the essential needs when it comes to designing experiences that matter. First, delightful. The ultimate goal is to design a feature to sustain users' attention with a mix of great UI design and psychology, creating a delightful mix for user. We want to create an immediate and positive emotional response from the user at the very first sight. And not only that, but we also want to create experiences that simplify the user's life and journey. Now, what does it mean when it comes to apply these principles and this particular one towards user experience? Well, here you can see how Vivid simplifies your life as soon as you enter the car by automatically triggering the navigation towards your predicted navigation destination, and then while having your favorite music ready started. So the idea is to leverage learning behavior to automatically suggest and start the right application at the right time, seamlessly without having you to prompt anything. No action required from the user. It all happens automatically, simplifying the user's life. And then we do believe that simplicity is key when it comes to create a delightful experience. Second, it has to be memorable. People judge an experience largely based on how they felt at its peak and at its end. So as a general rule, we like to remind that people won't always remember what you said to them, but they will always remember how you made them feel. So we want to provide a memorable solution with emotional power that passes the test. Oh yes, I remember like this system. That's the one with the. So similarly, when we think about first-time user experience in a car, every piece and part of the user experience and interface should be memorable, including the mere act of powering up your system. You should feel connected and oriented right away. It should be special. It should make you feel special, and it should be memorable. All of this right from the start. Now, another example relates to the actual features, topography and component architecture. So what you can see, for example, here is how we currently rethink the car control domain while leveraging a maximum of artifacts, including an actual rendering of your car. So the goal is to create a unique layout with great aesthetic and memory power. One of the key aspects here is that we can deploy this feature towards any car and then obviously update the rendering accordingly. It's not only memorable from a layout perspective, because you have easy to remember call to action, positioning, and iconography, but also memorable as a whole from a visual perspective, as the simple act to interacting with an actual rendering of your car creates a memorable experience. Safe in car, Derek mentioned it earlier, we need to create a safe experience that delights, surprises, has a sense of place in the context of driving. The idea is like, look at what we've made. Beautiful, right? But does it work? And then for whom does it work? So the challenge is to marry beautiful design and then form and functionality to create a functional, intuitive, and stunning solution in the context of driving. We also need to design multisensory experiences that considers user perspective throughout the design process and favorizing the aesthetic of interaction between the user and the device. So ultimately, we want to offer an instinctive solution, leveraging every possible interaction model, which means not only touch, but as I mentioned earlier, voice and gesture. So what you can see here, for example, is how we redefine the overall navigation feature while focusing on ease of use and call to action proximity. So as you can see, all fonts and classes are following a particular hierarchy. We are following NHTSA minimum font sizing guideline to create a safe, easy to scan, and an easy to use experience. Fonts are large, easily readable, and classified. All the buttons are positioned at reach towards the left side of the screen, close to the driver. The focus should always be on the road, so we want to design a standardized solution allowing the user to interact safely while keeping both the eyes and the brain on the road. We also introduced, for example, here around the current vehicle position, a progressive disclosure, limiting the amount of visual load while progressively fading out the map as you are looking further down the road. So this allows us to reduce the overall cognitive load on the screen while clearing up all the areas expounding content. As example, on the top left of the screen where you can see all your active navigation information and the next turn. So we make sure we clear up the back of it so the information is visually, standing out. This is an example on how it looks when we use a 3D map. The reason why I added it to the presentation, it just happened today because I got those examples this morning from the team. So we try to kind of rethink also how can we redefine the map experience, and then how can we create like a 3D rendered map style that kind of marry well with like the overall design style of the solution. So you can see a night mode on the left, a day mode on the right. Finally, it has to be intelligent. Being able to access the apps and functionality that are relevant to the driver at a particular time of the day, and this without having to prompt the system or think about it. So Vivid should obviously be doing all the thinking for you, and it should all happen seamlessly in the backend. So what you can see here is our latest smart approach menu. So that's what we also define as a functional system, displaying only what is relevant to the driver while being completely and automatically personalized. We remove the traditional system bar and dashboard menu that you know from like traditional system, and then instead what you get is a smart app ecosystem with a contextual set of recommendations triaged based on frequency of use, based on the particular user, and based on a particular time of the day. So every app appears in order of preferences. Predictive destination is already suggested. Music station and playlist are preset. Favorite coffee from your favorite vendor is already suggested from our commerce module. So what we do is we leverage personalized data learning, phone integration, connected application, car learning behavior for predictive car. And all of this is happening in the backend, translated into a friction-free, seamless experience that requires little to none effort from the user. We also recognize through the design and development process that car manufacturers are coming up with a lot of new different screens, trims, and dashboard setup. So in response to that, one of the key aspects of Vivid is the modular nature of it. We can deploy it towards any form factor, any aspect ratio, any resolution. We can also swap and interchange features following a common grid system. Now, for those who are not familiar with the concept of modular design in that context, it's basically a practice that subdivides a system into smaller parts called module, which can be independently created, modified, replaced, or exchanged between different systems. A simple example of a modular design in car is the fact that while many cars come as basic model, you can pay extra cash for snap-in upgrades, such as a more powerful engine, upgraded seats, seasonal tires, and these do not require any changes to other units of the car. So that's pretty much what modularity is about. Now, for the scalable and adaptive aspect of Vivid, it's pretty much referring to our graphical user interface that adapts seamlessly to different screen sizes. So what you can see on the screen is how seamlessly we can transition from one screen to another, leveraging a modular approach. So we talked about delightful, intelligent, memorable, safe in car. So when my team and I looked at it, we were trying to figure out how to put this into practices. What should be the perfect blend to marry all these principles into a simple and yet intuitive solution? We decided to push the boundaries and bring the experience to another level while introducing this contextual proactive system that anticipates your needs. Now, before showing you the latest version of Vivid, I would like to show you a quick video that illustrates in a very quick way the process of designing an infotainment solution from draft to final. what you can see on the screen here is the previous version of Vivid. So for this V1, you can say, we basically focused on nailing all the basics, and then we locked all the feature on a landscape form factor. Then what we did is that we decided to take a forward-thinking approach to our second iteration, and then we moved towards the portrait screen. So I will now walk you through the latest version of Vivid. Here and here. Okay, so here what you can see is Vivid powered on a 13-inch portrait display. So we created virtual prototype for this presentation in order to give you a quick overview. Some key factor here before showing you more of it. Like I said, Vivid is modular, so think about it as an open canvas with no boundaries. A smart and contextual approach, removing the traditional system bar and dashboard menus. Instead, what you get is a smart app ecosystem in the back end with contextual recommendation. So Vivid automatically triggers the right application as soon as you enter the car. In that example, you can predict your upcoming destination without requiring any action from the driver. And then the music is already on, calibrated to your preferred playlist and artist. And it all happens automatically, tailor-fit for the user. That's what we define as a smart system. So you can see majority of the screen is taken by the navigation with this little non-intrusive toast on the bottom section of the screen that is actually playing your music. Now on the top left, if I tap here, then I go back to what I call the menu. So this level upper is our smart menu. Here you can see every application appearing in order of preferences. So predictive navigation is already suggested. Music station and playlist are preset. As I mentioned, you have your favorite coffee from favorite vendor. Everything is here. It all happens on the back end, and then again, completely friction-free from a user interface perspective. Now, if I want, as example, so another thing that I want to touch upon before. So let's say that user number one, I'm going into my car, it's a regular day, this is my set of options. It could be a different driver, and at that point, you will have a different set of suggestions. So this, again, happens automatically based on what we learn from the driver over time. Now, going back to that particular example, if I want to open my Pandora, then I can just click in it. So what is particular about this multimedia player, it doesn't only focus on like the Pandora pieces, but this is more of a media aggregator. So what you can have here, it's like multiple vendor. So you could have like a Pandora or any other streaming vendor. You can have your radio and also your Bluetooth sources or USB sources. Now, when you're here, I mean, you can eventually, like scroll and then, go through your covers. You can tap to your favorite. What you can do is if you touch this toast on the bottom, then it becomes your full player. So here you have like regular access to basic functionality. You can, forward the music directly through the audio spectrum, or you can work from the call to actions. Closing here, we're coming back to my smart menu. So I'm going to go back to the navigation section here. So here you can see, like we talked about it earlier, but we redefined the topography of navigation as a whole. We tried to kind of take a more typographic approach. We focused on, again, font hierarchy to kind of create a solution that is easy to read. And we also tried to tackle it from a visual perspective with something that is a little more elegant than what we know from other solutions in the market. So really this overlaying, typography piece makes the system like much pleasant, I would say, aesthetically. Now on the bottom left, you have this little cursor. What you can do if you touch it and then you drag it up, and then you can split your screen. So at this point, your toast, your music toast becomes one of the cards as part of the smart menu that we talked about. So what you can do is you split your screen, and then you can bring a second set of options. So eventually you can open your player if you want here. Now we have the same model. You have your current music playing here, so you always have access. You don't have to do an extra click for that. And on top of it, you have all the browsing options that I presented you before from the full player. If you want to open your full music player right now, you tap on it and it basically populates it up. One of the key aspects also of Vivid is like the modularity of it. What you can decide right now is like you might not need to have half screen right now. Maybe you want to have some kind of a reminder of your current music, but maybe it doesn't have to be 50% of your screen. So what you do, you touch the modular button and then you drag it up, and then you can make it like a third music against 2/3 of navigation. So this is completely modular in that aspect. We try to work on a very open grid that gives you a lot of flexibility to customize the screen kind of the way you want it. Now, when it comes to the bottom bar here, what you can see is like we try to basically populate the main car control action that user usually interact with in the car. You can see the intensity of your vent, the temperature of your AC, the volume. If you want to change the volume, you just have to touch it and then move your finger along to be able to adjust the intensity of it. Now, I showed you also a little earlier when I was mentioning the modular aspect of Vivid. On the bottom, you have a little lip. If I drag it up, it brings the control menu of my car. So here you have different sections based on outside of the car, interior, vent, sources and settings. So you have a car rendering. You can interact with the car rendering, for example, to unlock or lock your car. You can access your wipers, light. I mean, all those options. Now, if I want to go to the next section from the seat, as example, I will tap on it, and you will open, the seats control section. So here you can basically adjust your seat positioning. You can do it from a driver perspective, from a passenger perspective, and you also have a whole bunch of options related to the interior of your car, interior ambient lighting and that kind of things. Now, if you want to leave this menu, you can either way drag it up, or you can also click on the outside. So this is where we are right now. We are making like fairly good progress. And we are like within like the testing phase right now. We are still adding more feature, but at least it gives you like a good idea of where it's heading towards when it comes to our Vivid infotainment solution. That's about it for me.
Wow, thank you, Derek and Sylvain, for your insightful presentation. So we will move on to the Q&A. And before we dive into that, I would say I will also encourage the attendees of the session to send any doubts that they had during your both presentations to me. So I will list it right after. So I'll already have some and some queries that I got from the public, from the audience. So let's kick it off. So based off current trends, what are the most concerning safety issues related to large infotainment screens, and how is the industry working on it?
I think I can take this one. I think the main issue is probably being able to manage again like the cognitive load, and then making sure that we maintain the safety aspect, when it comes to interacting with the screen. As you introduce, more estate in terms of physical size, right, and then more application. I think one side is to making sure like the people are keeping their eyes on the road, but I think, like I mentioned earlier, another aspect is keeping the brain on the road. So the challenge for us is to be able to design, application on big screen estate, simple enough so you don't have to think through it too much and keep the focus, again on the road.
Thanks.
Well put. I would add to that it's not necessarily the presence of the large touchscreen. It's what you're doing with that large touchscreen and how you're designing whatever it is that you're putting on that large touchscreen. So, for example, if you're, Sylvain mentioned some work previously on text sizing and touch target sizing. If you have a touch screen that you think is an appropriate size for the car, but you're also putting, really tiny icons on there, it's not going to really matter the size of the touch. We get asked about that quite a lot, actually, about the what size of touch screen we need to be putting in our cars for a 5 to 7 year time frame, and then a 10 to 12 year time frame. That's certainly something to keep in mind for your design team, but at the end of the day, it's about what you're putting on there that's going to lead to that distraction, not necessarily the presence of that screen.
Thank you. Second question, how is the data protected currently in the current ecosystem?
I'm not sure.
Could you say that again?
Yeah, sorry. How is the data protected currently in the current ecosystem?
I'm not sure if I understand the question. How is that protected?
Data.
Oh, okay. So how is data protected
Yes.
in the current ecosystem? Okay. The challenge with data privacy is that consumers don't necessarily have it top of mind until there's a breach. But at the same time, they're willing to give up a bit of that, so give up a little bit of their personal data for that convenience. So the short, punchy / flippant answer is that they're, as long as they're sharing that data on their mobile device, they're going to be fine with it in the car.
Okay. In your opinion, which OEMs have managed to build this humanized experience?
Which OEM?
Yeah.
It's a hard question. I mean, I don't have any on top of my head right now. I think, a lot of those, like, you're gonna see more and more of like those integrated experiences, probably with like this new, series of disruptors coming up. So I think Tesla is doing a great job at that. But I think, again, I mean, there are other solutions in the market that are coming, with like, I mean, I don't want to name a brand per se, right? But I think, I would say Tesla is probably like one that is like very well, integrated in that manner, I would say.
I'll say that they are all improving at some aspect of that.
Okay. Fourth question I have listed. You hear me? Sorry. No.
There you are, Fabio.
Sorry. And any thoughts on the utility of head-up display, and do you plan to incorporate it in Vivid? Why do you think there's not been more adoption of HUD systems?
So I'll tee that up and then let Sylvain respond to the Vivid part. So the thing that we found in our research is that head-up displays can be useful, especially for sat nav and safety, if they're used properly and they call out upcoming turns and upcoming objects in the road, things like that. But there's a couple of problems here. Number one, they're very easy to overload. Anything beyond about 5 to 7 bits of information is going to seem like too much information on there. And the other problem is, and so related to that, you end up with a situation where you're in danger of occluding an object rather than calling it out, which is obviously not something that we want to have happen. The other is from the purely consumer angle. Head-up display owners actually tell us in our research it's sort of a mixed bag. Some of them don't always keep them shown because they don't like how they look. They're not particularly delightful to look at. And they're not particularly useful for what they might use it for. So it's sort of a mixed bag. There's certainly some potential there, but what we've seen so far is not always the greatest from a human outward perspective.
Yeah, and then to add to your question, if we plan on incorporating into Vivid, absolutely. So I think what I showed you today is just like in the context of a portrait center stack, if you will. But we also have the solution that is deployable in combo with a HUD and a cluster as well. We are also deploying this solution with like HUD, cluster, center stack, and then receipt infotainment. And then there is also a stack with a controller, so you can still leverage, like those like knob controller for the car. So yes, we plan on deploying it like for any model. Now, depending on the car, I mean, we prepared a version of it that was like a large pillar-to-pillar screen. It really depends on the setup of the car. I mean, like Derek said, I mean, not everybody's coming up with like a HUD at that point. I mean, we have some of our customers that have a HUD, so that's something that we are designing for already. But no matter what, Vivid will come with like a HUD integration for sure.
Thank you. Then I got one last question. Oh, no, just there are one last minute, so there are 2 more questions. In an automotive context, the interaction mode of touch itself presents challenges, instability due to vibrations, bumpy terrain. Does the research show this to be a problem? And if so, what creative solutions might exist?
In terms of vibration on the touchscreen?
Yes.
I think it's probably vibration from the driver, as you're driving, and then.
Right. We'll put it this way: touchscreen in general brings challenges in the car, right? Not just for vibration, but in terms of operation with gloved hands and so on and so forth. If you want to get rid of the touchscreen entirely, you need to have some other unique and tactful way to deliver the connected media and sat-nav services that more and more people, not just early adopters, are demanding in the car. I've seen in demo and in trade show settings some thoughts behind what a more rugged touchscreen experience might look like in the car, but I haven't seen it like in practice working all that well. I've seen a lot of people talk about getting rid of touchscreens in the car, but again, you need to have some way to deliver those services that people want.
And I think from to bridge back to the creative question, I think what we do as example, I showed you on the prototype, like how we address volume, right? So, what we do usually, we try to focus on, touch target, we make sure that we have enough of an area to be able to touch. And then as example, if you have like a dial that helps you to adjust the volume, we are focusing on the gesture direction, not necessarily the area of touch. So as soon as you touch the area, you can move up in diagonal, right, or straight, or it doesn't matter, it will go up because that's the action of going up that captures, like the motion of dialing up. So we try to make sure, like, again, we are not narrowing the touch target to the component per se, but we try to think about like how can we leverage, like the whole screen as a touch target as soon as you interact with the particular component.
Placement is important to that as well. Placing a touch target on the edge or in a corner is going to be a lot easier than forcing a user to sort of float their shoulder and elbow to aim for a touch target like right in the middle of the screen as well. So an important consideration.
Thank you. So yeah, actually I had one last question, but it likely goes back to our first about safety, but I will list it anyway. How safe are these features to be interacted with when we drive, as these could increase the driver distraction level?
It's an important question. This is something that we've been looking at going back 10 years, back when touchscreens were first introduced in the car, right? The idea is that it would introduce moving displays, moving images. You would have a non-standard touch target width and height and things like that. But here we are. So there's a number of things that we can do to mitigate that, like what Sylvain was mentioning before about making sure that you have a target size and a text size that's appropriate for a car. The other is ensuring that for things like drive critical functions, so things like wiper speed and cruise control, some of those things are not necessarily going to be appropriate for a touchscreen. So it'd be important to keep the touchscreen for things that it's most appropriate for, things like connected services and sat nav and media, and sort of leave important drive critical functions, whatever we determine those to be, somewhere else on a dedicated control or something else.
I think also part of what we do more and more, so I mentioned it earlier, also we have like an internal research team, and then we've been focusing a lot on cognitive distraction. And then the fact, like, used to be a time when we were focusing really on, how well a feature performed when we were testing it. Now we are trying to think, again, I mean, does this feature, use just the minimum required attention from you to make sure that you keep the brain on the road? So even in the way we test our features right now, and I think we share an article soon about it, but we try to think about it not only from inside the car perspective, but also from outside the car. So we try to, look at, ease of use when you interact with it, but we also try to see what happens if there is an emergency situation, while you are interacting with the system. So really, we are opening up the scope of testing outside the car to make sure, like again, we manage the distraction level with all those different features.
Thank you. That was it with regards to the Q&A. So to our speaker, thanks a lot for the insightful presentation and for answering all questions. And also to all participants, thanks for tuning in to our webinar today. So we will be happy, of course, to welcome you again in one of our next webinars. So from my side, I wish you a nice rest of the day and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.